The first time Arham Ramani saw his boss cry, she wasn't in her glass office, commanding a room full of executives with her sharp voice and colder eyes. She wasn't dressed in power suits or surrounded by people trying to impress her. She was slumped against the back seat of his old, worn-out car, barely conscious, her head resting against the window, whispering something broken and fragile that didn't belong to the woman everyone feared. If you believe kindness can change lives and that everyone deserves a second chance, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Tales. Stories like this remind us what it means to be human. Arham had always been invisible at work. A junior accountant in a towering corporate building, he blended into spreadsheets and silence. His colleagues knew him as the quiet one, the one who never complained, never argued, never even looked up unless spoken to. Life had trained him that way. After losing his father at a young age and growing up watching his mother struggle through illness and debt, Arham had learned that survival often meant staying unnoticed. His boss, Saira Voss, was the exact opposite. She was known across the company as a storm in human form. Brilliant, ruthless, and unapproachable, she had built her reputation on discipline and control. Employees whispered about her in corridors, describing her as someone who had no room for weakness, no tolerance for mistakes. To Arham, she was simply the person who signed his paycheck and occasionally tore apart his reports without looking at him twice. That night had started like any other, late hours, flickering office lights, and the quiet hum of computers. Arham had stayed back to finish a report, unaware that upstairs, a corporate party had spiraled into something darker. By the time he stepped out of the building, the parking lot was nearly empty, except for a figure sitting on the curb. It took him a moment to recognize her. Saira Voss, the untouchable CEO, was sitting alone, her heels discarded beside her, her posture slumped, her face flushed with alcohol and something deeper, something like grief. Arham hesitated. Every instinct told him to walk away. This was not his place. This was not his world. But then she tried to stand, stumbled, and almost fell. Something in that moment broke through his fear. Without saying a word, he approached her, picked up her heels, and gently helped her into his car. She didn't resist. She didn't even seem fully aware of who he was. She just leaned into the seat, her breathing uneven, her usual armor completely gone. The drive was silent. The city lights passed by like distant memories, and Arham focused on the road, unsure of what he was doing or why. He had never been this close to her before, never seen her without the mask of authority. Now, she looked human. Fragile. Lost. At one point, she whispered something barely audible. A name, perhaps. Or maybe just a broken piece of a sentence. Arham didn't ask. He didn't want to intrude into whatever pain she was carrying. When they reached her apartment building, he helped her out of the car, supporting her weight as they walked inside. The building was grand, with polished floors and silent elevators, a world far removed from Arham's small rented room. He managed to get her to her door, using the access card he found in her purse, and guided her inside. He didn't look around much. He didn't want to. It felt wrong to witness her life without permission. He simply helped her to the couch, placed a glass of water on the table, and covered her with a blanket he found nearby. For a moment, he stood there, unsure of what to do next. Then he turned and left, closing the door quietly behind him. He never expected anything to come from it. The next morning, Arham woke up early, as usual. The sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of his small room, and the world felt ordinary again. He got ready for work, replaying the previous night in his mind, wondering if he had crossed a line. By the time he reached his apartment door to leave, there was a knock. It was soft at first, then more urgent. Arham opened the door, and everything inside him froze. Saira Voss stood there, completely different from the woman he had seen every day at work. Her hair was loosely tied, her face pale, her eyes red, not from anger, but from tears. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, unexpectedly, she broke. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she struggled to find words. Her voice trembled, fragile in a way Arham had never imagined possible. She looked at him not as an employee, not as someone beneath her, but as someone she needed. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her composure collapsing with each step. Arham closed the door quietly, his heart racing, unsure of what was happening. What followed was something he would never forget. Syra sat down, her hands shaking, her voice barely holding together as she began to speak, not as a boss, but as a person carrying years of unspoken pain. She revealed fragments of a life that no one in the office knew. A childhood filled with pressure, a family that valued success over love, relationships that had crumbled because she never learned how to be vulnerable. The previous night had been the breaking point. A call from someone she once trusted had reopened old wounds, and for the first time in years, she had allowed herself to fall apart. And somehow, in that moment, Arham had been there. He hadn't judged her. He hadn't taken advantage of her vulnerability. He had simply helped her and left. That simple act had shaken something inside her. For Arham, it was difficult to process. He had never been seen as someone important, someone capable of making a difference in someone else's life, especially not hers. Days turned into weeks, and something began to change. At work, Syra remained professional, but there was a subtle shift. Her tone softened, her eyes lingered a little longer, and for the first time, she acknowledged Arham's presence. But the real change happened outside the office. She started visiting him occasionally, not as a boss, but as someone seeking quiet, understanding, and peace. They would sit together in his small room, talking about life, about struggles, about dreams that had been buried under responsibilities. Arham shared his own story, his mother's illness, the sacrifices he had made, the dreams he had quietly given up. And for the first time, someone listened to him with genuine attention. Their worlds were different, but their pain was not. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in warm shades of gold, Syra looked at Arham with a kind of clarity that hadn't been there before. She realized that strength wasn't about control or power. It was about allowing yourself to be seen, to be vulnerable, to connect. Arham, too, began to change. He spoke more confidently at work, stood up for his ideas, and slowly stepped out of the shadows he had lived in for so long. Their connection wasn't defined by titles or expectations. It was built on something far more powerful, understanding. But life, as always, tested them. Rumors started spreading in the office. Whispers about favoritism, about inappropriate relationships, about things people didn't understand. The same world that once ignored Arham now watched him closely, ready to judge. For a moment, everything seemed at risk. Syra faced a choice, protect her image or stand by the truth. And Arham faced his own, return to invisibility or stand firm in his worth. What happened next changed everything. Syra addressed the rumors publicly, not with anger, but with honesty. She spoke about respect, about recognizing people beyond their positions, about the importance of kindness in a world driven by ambition. She didn't mention Arham by name, but her words were enough. And for the first time, people saw her differently. Not as a storm, but as someone who had learned to weather one. Arham, standing quietly in the crowd, felt something he hadn't felt in years, pride. As the story comes to its close, if this journey touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like, share, and comment. Your support keeps stories like this alive on Lifeline Tales. And before we end,